I want to welcome everyone to today's Why History Matters talk, sponsored by the Lytton Center. My name is Dr. Heather McCarty, and I am one of the three co-directors of the Lytton Center. The amazing Dr. Catherine Michael and the amazing Dr. Kyle Livy are other two co-directors. I want to just briefly share a bit about the Lytton Center with you all, and then I will turn things over to Dr. Livy to introduce today's speaker and our talk. The Lytton Center considers the ways in which the study of the past can help to shape the present and the future. Our mission is to inspire the Ohlone community to work for public good through programming focused on access, equity, inclusion, justice, and service. The Lytton Center explores challenges facing our community and the world, the past, the present, and the future, and fosters big ideas that will inspire and transform Ohlone and the larger community for the better. Through training, programming, and capacity building, and talks like the one you're going to have today, the Lytton Center empowers students to advocate for a just and equitable world. And now I want to turn things over to Dr. Kyle Livy so that he can introduce today's talk and the inspiring Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens.
Hello, everyone. We're so excited and happy to have all of you here, and especially honored to have Dr. Cooper Owens joining us today at the Lytton Center. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to go over a few ground rules. If you are interested, we want you to ask questions, and we'll have a Q&A section at the end of the talk. The way to do this, there are two ways actually. The way to do this is to use the Q&A feature, which you'll notice at the bottom of your screen if you're joining us via Zoom webinar, or if you'd like, you can email your questions to lyttoncenter@ohlone.edu. That's lyttoncenter@ohlone.edu, and I'll put that information in the chat as we go through the talk today. Okay, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens. Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens is the Linda and Charles Wilson Professor in the History of Medicine and Director of the Humanities in Medicine program at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. She is an Organization of American Historians, OAH, Distinguished Lecturer, a past American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists Research Fellow, and has won a number of prestigious awards for her scholarly and advocacy work in reproductive and birthing justice. A popular public speaker, Dr. Cooper Owens has spoken widely across the United States and Europe. She's published articles, essays, book chapters, and think pieces on a number of issues that concern African American experiences and reproductive justice. Her first book, Medical Bondage, Race, Gender, and the Origins of American Gynecology, which came out in 2017 on the University of Georgia Press, I hope you all get it, won the 2018 Darlene Clark Hine Book Award from the Organization of American Historians as the best book written in African American women's and gender history. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce the amazing, wonderful Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens.
Oh, thank you all so much, Dr. McCarty, Dr. Livy. And I just have to say, and also let me thank everyone, the interpreters, those who are in the virtual audience, for taking time out of your day to learn a little bit about the past. And I have to say, you never know where you'll end up. Dr. Livy and I were classmates at UCLA, and when we were in the throes of dissertating, we would often steal away to a restaurant that shall not be named, and it fueled our sugar addiction for the remainder of our dissertation research. So I am just honored to be able to share space with you, Kyle, and with your community. So thank you so much for inviting me. With that said, we are going to get into this conversation about a little known aspect of United States history and the history of medicine in particular. So I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint now. I hope all of you all can see this. And today we're talking about why history matters, how slavery helped develop American gynecology. And what I really want to do is first start off with my intellectual genealogy. And so what does that mean, right? I'm a child of the 70s and the 80s. And when I was very young, this mini series named Roots came on TV. And it was about Alex Haley, this author, he's best known for Roots, but also he helped to write the autobiography of Malcolm X. He did a tracing of his family's lineage and family tree all the way back to West Africa. And I remember it impacted my family a lot. My dad worked at the National Archives in DC. My mother was like a lot of kind of educated Black middle-class women who suddenly became very interested in genealogy. And I had no desire to know any of this. You know, I was a kid, I didn't care. And so look at where I ended up, literally tracing the genealogy of American gynecology, but I wanted to do so a bit differently. I wanted to do so by focusing on the patients and focusing on the first experimental patients who were widely used to help develop this branch of medicine. And this group represented enslaved women. And so, you know, as I mentioned many, many moons ago at UCLA, I kind of started along this path, not quite knowing what I would find and the stories that would emerge. Now, after I wrote the book, I thought, okay, you know, I'll probably get tenure. I think it's a pretty good book. I didn't have many thoughts beyond that, right? Most people don't buy history books, especially history books written by academics. And so in 2017, in August, as a matter of fact, my life kind of shifts. And it shifts because at that time, I was an assistant professor at Queens College. It was a part of the City University of New York system, living my life in Brooklyn. And all of a sudden, I was thrust into this conversation, really a national conversation around the legacy of James Marion Sims. He is known as the father of American gynecology. And why was I thrust into this conversation, right? And really this historical discourse around iconography and symbols and all of these kinds of things. It was largely because I lived in New York, I was teaching at a college in New York, but also there had been a number of protests that had grown, you know, kind of louder and larger around the removal of statues. At first in the South, right? You heard about Charlottesville and, you know, students and a lot of Southern colleges kind of toppling statues to Confederate soldiers and officers. We didn't really hear a lot about this in the North until James Marion Sims enters the picture. So what you're looking at is a picture of Sims's statue in Central Park. It was the first statue that was dedicated to an American in Central Park, and it sat at the easternmost corner of the park. Central Park is huge. I don't know how many of you have been there, but the easternmost corner is also near East Harlem, which is primarily Latino, Latina, or Latinx community. And so I would say since 2008, many members of that community wanted the statue removed. How the issue becomes amplified on the national stage is largely because of young people. So in August 2017, the Black Youth Project 100 decides to stage a protest, right, in front of the Sims Memorial. And the protest literally gained steam because of a picture that went viral. So if you look at the picture, for those who can, you'll notice that the second woman kind of to my left, she's in a turban. Jewel Cadet was the vice president of the Black Youth Project 100. And Jewel organized this protest. And the picture literally went viral because they were dressed to represent the enslaved women that James Marion Sims had experimented on. They had blood splattered hospital gowns on. And also the statue was directly across the street from the New York Academy of Medicine. And all of a sudden, everybody and their mama started to contact me. Oh my gosh, what are your thoughts? Should the statue be removed? What do you have to say, Dr. Cooper Owens? Until my press, and this rarely happens, right? You can speak to any of your professors. My press says we have to ride this wave, and they released my book 2 months earlier. And all of a sudden, I am no longer an assistant professor of African American history at Queens College. I'm now the country's foremost expert on James Marion Sims. And I had to think, what do I do with this new platform? Do I answer the question? Because whether the statue removed or stayed, there was something I really wanted to get out that I felt for me as a historian of medicine and slavery was far more important. And that was, how do we talk about the legacy of medical racism? And in particular, the Black maternal health crisis that was going on and is still ongoing. And so I really used the opportunity to shift the conversation away from Sims and to really talk about the legacy left by men like Sims and his contemporaries. And so once again, I'm brought into this conversation. The statue was removed April 17th, 2018, a little less than a year after that picture went viral. My phone is blowing up, my inbox is hot, and I'm thinking people are calling to wish me happy birthday, but in fact, the statue was removed. And to this day, it is in an undisclosed location, somewhere in the 5 boroughs in New York, because residents of Brooklyn, where Sims is buried, did not want the statue at his grave. And so that is a conversation for another day. But what it allowed me to do, especially with reporters, and when I started to give talks, was to reframe the conversation. And I wanted to reframe the conversation from a kind of either or binary, right? Many times people wanted to know, is Sims a savior or is he a monster? And I said, the truth is a little more complicated than that. And so I used this title from a front page article in South Carolina's Post and Courier newspaper. James Marion Sims was born in South Carolina. And although Lauren Saucer did an amazing investigative journalist approach to the Sims legacy and controversy, I didn't like the framing. Savior of women or medical monster, the fraught legacy of South Carolina's most infamous physician. And what it really does is it sets up historical actors as boogeymen. And what I was trying to show was Sims is not exceptional, right? If we think about the legacy of medical racism, you can't pin that on one person, right? So the building blocks of medical racism began far before Sims even started his experimental research and his experimental surgical procedures on these enslaved women. And it started in the Atlantic world, in Europe, and in colonial America, and then what later becomes the United States. And so that's what I really wanted to show, right? Who were the people who put the building blocks in place? And so that meant tackling a lot of historical inaccuracies and information kind of on both sides of the camp. Those who wanted to defend Sims and those who most certainly wanted to privilege the women that Sims experimented on. And so I heard all kinds of things, that Sims was the person who created the idea that Black people didn't experience pain. And I was like, no, that kind of existed well before Sims even started med school. Well, Sims butchered the reproductive organs of enslaved women. Not quite. Sims was a slave-owning physician who lived in Alabama. What slave-owning physician wants to cut off the lifeline of slavery and the economic assets that make them wealthy, right? Nobody wants to do that, because during this time, if you were an enslaved woman and you had a child, you passed on your status as slave to the child, which meant for the owner, every birth represented wealth. So that wasn't factual, right? What about this idea that Sims wanted to intentionally addict the enslaved women that he operated on to opium? And I was like, no, not quite. They were suffering from a condition where there were holes or fistula, and I'll talk about that a little later. So if you suture or stitch them, right, the one thing you don't want to happen is ripping of that suture or that stitching. So opium in the 19th century was given as a form of making one constipated, right? So what I wanted to do was really present a landscape of the antebellum era, but also slavery and the history of medicine, so that people could really concentrate on what I thought were the much more important issues, right? And it wasn't, believe it or not, this idea around consent. Because the thing about me being a historian of slavery in the 19th century, consent doesn't exist for enslaved people. If I wrote a book about the consent of enslaved people, I probably wouldn't get that book published, because you're talking about human beings who were legally considered movable property. But were there other biomedical ethical issues that I could highlight, particularly from that time period? And I found that there were. So let me begin first with the men who Sims inherits his ideas, his practices, even the cultural practice of being a doctor in the 19th century. And what I hoped it would do would also to kind of dismantle this exceptionality narrative in history, right? And so I first begin with a talk of Georges Cuvier. He was French born, arguably France's most famous natural historian or scientist in the late 18th century and early 19th century. He dissected the cadaver of a Black woman born in South Africa named Saartjie Baartman, or her anglicized name was Sarah Baartman, and she was derisively known as the Hottentot Venus. I'll talk about her in just a few. Ephraim McDowell, a name that's not as well known. In 1809, he performs surgery on a patient, experimental surgery, and removes a 20+ pound ovarian tumor. And then gets the bright idea after this patient survives. And I'll tell you why that's important. He says, you know what, let me experiment. Let me kind of perfect this procedure so that I can publish it and perhaps become well known, save the lives of patients. And he does that decades before Sims's work in obstetrical fistula. John Peter Mettauer, early pioneer of vesico-vaginal fistula, or this is the surgery that Sims performed on those enslaved women. And he also experimented on a black and white women. The Black woman was enslaved a full decade before Sims starts. And Francois Marie Provost, French born, known as the father of the cesarean section. He leaves France, goes to their most economically profitable colony, which at the time was Haiti. He does this in the late 18th century or the 1700s. By 1804, Haiti stages a revolution and they win, and they kick the French out, and Provost has to go. But while he was in Haiti, he performs cesarean sections on enslaved Haitian women, many of whom died because this is an abdominal cut, right? And then he goes to another former French colony that's now part of the United States, Louisiana, and continues the same experimental work on enslaved women there. All of this happens well before Sims is even a doctor. And so I don't say this to defend Sims. Sims didn't need my defense, right? Even in death, he doesn't need my defense. But what I wanted to be able to show, right, is that when we're talking about something that's structural or systemic, right, one person doesn't create that. It's literally built upon over decades and centuries. So first, let's talk about Saartjie Baartman. She was the woman who was born in South Africa, part of the Khoi ethnic group, and she was sold by her owner at the age of 17 to his brother and his brother's business partner, an Englishman. She lives in England for about 2.5 years. She is essentially treated like a freak of nature, a circus act made to do all kinds of dehumanizing things. And then she is later sold to an animal keeper in France. And this is where Cuvier enters the picture. Now, before I talk about his involvement with Baartman, Baartman is this kind of celebrity, you know, not just in England and in France, but really all over Europe. And why is she so popular? Largely because of the size of her buttocks. And so she becomes a template for me as a medical historian for how white medical men, especially elite white medical men, are thinking about, writing about, treating African women, right? And particularly those who are owned African women. And so all of a sudden, the size of her buttocks is pathologized and known as stereotypia, right? I mean, to this day, there is still a medical term called stereotypia, the enlargement of the buttocks. And I'm like, well, my Lord, if that's the case, my entire family suffers from this, myself included, right? I lived in South Africa for a few months. I can tell you, she looks no different than any other South African woman. And yet there was this way in which Baartman takes on, you know, and not her, but the ways that Europeans see her, there's this repulsion to this woman, right? In fact, Hottentot is a very derogatory name for Black South Africans. And then Venus is almost this ironic twist because a Hottentot could never represent the goddess of beauty, right? And or beautiful perfection. And so there's this attraction to her because she's so different and yet a repulsion. And so that's why I thought this illustration was so important, this French illustration, because you can literally see the ways that the public is trying to make sense of her. And later, how Cuvier even writes and treats her. Right? So there's a soldier trying to reach for her buttocks. There's a woman dressed in finery peering at her knees. There was this belief that somehow Africans had knocked knees and were different. There's another soldier trying to peer under her covering, the genital covering. Does she have a hooded labia? And there's someone to my right on my computer screen where he's literally tightening the lenses of his glasses, right, to focus more intently on Baartman's nearly nude body. And so by the time she enters the National Museum of Paris, where Cuvier is a leading scientist and physician, he is really trying to figure out, is this woman representative of the missing link between humans and primates? And he does everything in his power to try and experiment on her. And she says no. And then she dies, right, at the age of 25. And he now has possession of her body. And so she's moved from the menagerie in the museum. That's where you keep plants and animals. And she's brought to his examination room, and he performs this autopsy. And he takes out her brain and he preserves it, puts it in a bell jar. He removes her genitalia, preserves it, puts it in a bell jar. He takes all the tendons and the veins and the flesh from her skeleton, cleanses the skeleton, and puts it on display. And her genitalia, her brain, and her skeleton are on display from the early 19th century all the way until 1974, when the museum loses her brain and her genitalia. And what we learn from this is this belief that there is a biological difference between Black and white people, right? So allegedly, supposedly. Are Africans actually the missing link between human beings and primates? And also, what about the afterlife of someone who's enslaved? That for Black women, right, their reproductive parts, their bodies can literally become tools of teaching, right, for scientists and for physicians. And so there's even value in the reproductive organs, right, or the cadaver of an enslaved person for medical purposes. And this translates to the ways in which enslaved women, Black women, are written about and treated across the ocean in the United States. And so this brings me to Ephraim McDowell, the father of Ovariotomy. He was essentially a small town doctor in Kentucky. He was a small slave-owning physician as well. And his life changes when he meets a white woman, Mrs. Mary Todd Crawford, who is suffering from a distended belly. She doesn't know what's wrong. She just knows she probably isn't pregnant because she was a mother, and this didn't feel like a pregnancy. McDowell tries to figure these things out. In the 19th century, men could not examine women physically. So he's trying to ask questions and all of these things. And he says, I think you may have an ovarian tumor. I'll need to operate. That doesn't sound so, weird to us or strange. People operate all the time. Well, this is 1809. And if you are going to remove a tumor, that means there has to be an abdominal incision. And so what that means for McDowell and the patient, Mary Todd Crawford, is he will probably kill her because anesthesia is just not a thing. But beyond that, abdominal incisions mean death, and almost immediate death. But she's so desperate, she and her husband agree. On Christmas morning, he sneaks and performs the surgery in his medical office. Amazingly, Mrs. Todd Crawford lives, and in fact, lives to be an elderly person. She was in her 30s or 40s when she visited McDowell. She lives to be in her 70s. And McDowell then says, oh my gosh, I have to experiment. I have to perfect this. And so he gathers about 5 cases of negresses, 4 of whom were enslaved. 1 was considered a free woman of color. And over the span of 9 years, he performs surgeries, experimental surgeries on these women. Finally, he publishes his article in 1817, 8 years after he first performed surgery on Mrs. McDowell. On Mrs. Todd Crawford. And when he publishes his article, he thinks, okay, I am going to blow up. America is going to be placed on the map. That does not happen. In fact, he is derided. And a leading doctor in Europe's most popular and leading medical journal, The Lancet, which is still in circulation today, Dr. Johnson writes that, of course, McDowell, this frontier, backwoods doctor, would perform on negresses who can bear cutting and pain with the impunity of dogs and rabbits. Now, what does that mean, right? It was a kind of reigning scientific belief and medical belief that Black women in particular bred like animals. They bred very fast. It was easy for them. And also because Black people were in a state of arrested development, especially mentally, right? They didn't experience pain. They were like children. They nothing really shocked them. And so he thought, of course, those women would survive. But the thing is, one of the women died, right? And so here you now have another building block in the ways in which, women of African descent were being treated, written about. What is also important is the year. 1808 represents something. So anything after 1807 becomes important. The US Constitution bans the transatlantic slave trade, right? So no ships can come from Africa to the United States anymore. How in the world are slave owners who are making cash hand over fist, right? Especially for the wealthiest ones, like say George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, how in the world can they continue to make money? Natural increase. And so this means that all of a sudden, things that had been, and this happened in the colonies actually before, but now it is law by the 19th century. Things that had been the rule for Europeans, right? Children inherit the status of the father, does not apply for Black women. Their children, unlike any other group in the United States, their children inherit their status as slaves, right? Their bonded status. And so with this focus on increasing the reproductive capabilities, maintaining the reproductive health of Black women, that becomes important. And it literally intersects not with just doctors, but slave owners and even the state, right? And so Ephraim McDowell is a part of that push, particularly because he begins his experimental work in 1809 on these enslaved women. John Peter Mettauer, by the 1830s, here you have this pioneer in obstetrical fistula, like McDowell, a very wealthy, elite, slave-owning physician. He, in fact, founded the Randolph-Macon College of Medicine. He is known as the father of American plastic surgery because of surgical work he did to repair hair lips. So John Peter Mettauer, very respected doctor and surgeon, decides he wants to cure women of this condition that he sees as dreadful, right? It's called, in the 19th century, vesico-vaginal fistula, VESICO, vaginal fistula, and you can see the fistula on the screen. What does that mean? A woman would be in labor for days, on average 2 to 3 days. So what we call that a protracted labor. And she is trying to expel the fetus, right, from her body, but it's stuck. So there's sloughing that happens in the upper vaginal area that creates holes or fistula. The vesico, the VESICO, is the bladder, because the bladder sits right above that upper vaginal area. So if you have a hole, whether it's microscopic or gaping, and the bladder is right above it, the end result is incontinence. And if there is ripping in the anus, there's incontinence there too. So it doesn't kill you, right? It's not a death sentence, but as a young woman who is, of back then, this is the language, right, of breeding age, she can get pregnant more easily than someone who's older. And if she's enslaved, oh my goodness, the kind of social ostracism, the decreased value, the stench, the infections. It is, it was a disease that was quite common, but also one that was really something that nobody wanted to experience, whether you were the person who was in close proximity because of the smell or the sufferer. So John Peter Mettauer is trying to fix this. And he does so through an experimental surgery on an enslaved woman and a white woman. They're about the same age, late teens, early 20s. And he uses a silk suture method. So essentially he takes silk thread to suture the fistula. It works on the white patient. So he is waiting for the Black woman to heal. She doesn't. He tries for 8 trials over a number of years to cure this enslaved woman. She just does not heal from this condition. And when Mettauer publishes his article, he says in a moment of transparency, not using the kind of euphemistic language of 19th century folk, he says, if the patient could have been healed if she had stopped having sexual intercourse or participating in sexual intercourse. Wait, the patient could have been healed had she stopped participating in sexual intercourse? She's enslaved. She doesn't own her body. In fact, she can't tell you to stop experimenting on her. How in the world does she then say, I am not going to engage in sexual intercourse? She could have been raped. She could have, in fact, Mettauer could have been the one engaging in sexual intercourse. Maybe she was married to an enslaved man. There are all kinds of, today we would say, social determinants, right, that could impact this woman's ability to heal. And although women were considered subset of men and they had more degraded statuses, we're talking about someone who was free and someone who was not. And so the very reality of an enslaved woman's life, because that's the thing, even though she's a patient, she still has to work. She's still engaging in sexual intercourse, right? And possibly not of her own doing. And so all of these things matter. And in that moment of his frustration, the transparency really sets up for me as a historian of medicine, the different ways that Black and white women, especially in the antebellum South, are living their lives even in illness. The next doctor is the one that everybody kind of talks about, the father of American gynecology, James Marion Sims. I saw on Wikipedia entry one time, they said Deirdre Cooper Owens coined that. I'm like, no. Deirdre Cooper Owens was not born in the 1870s. And so Sims actually dies in the 1870s. And he's given this honorific by his peers. Sims was also a slave-owned physician, born in upstate South Carolina, but he achieves, at the time, not even notoriety in the 19th century. Today, we would say notoriety, but back then he achieves fame for the experimental work that he performs on these enslaved women in Alabama, excuse me. And Sims, like McDowell, has this epiphany about how to heal these enslaved women that he was going to experiment on because of a condition that happened to a white woman. And he had to examine this white woman vaginally. And as he was doing so, there was an enslaved woman in his medical practice who was suffering from vesicovaginal fistula. And he thought, originally he said, okay, you can spend the night, your plantation is far, but I'm sending you back. There's nothing I can do for you. You tell your owner I can't help you. But after he performs a vaginal examination on the white woman, he thinks, oh my gosh, if I can actually open up the vaginal cavity and see inside, then perhaps I can see the fistula and I can attempt to suture it. And so he takes this enslaved woman, he takes 2 pewter spoons, and he does so. And he says, I had seen as no man had seen before. It was as clear as the nose on my face. He is inspired. And as he writes in his memoir, The Story of My Life, I canvassed the county for cases. And he canvasses and he gets about a little over half dozen enslaved women. And as he writes, he had a little hospital built for himself. This is a picture of the hospital in Mount Meigs, Alabama. He later finishes the surgeries in Montgomery. But this 1895 picture of the hospital that Sims originally started his experiments in was still in 1895 being used to care for Negro patients. And although it's grainy, you can see here with the cursor, this is a child, a Black child. Above her is a Black woman bent over a laundry basin and an older Black gentleman sitting on the porch, kind of in the center. So Sims has access to this vulnerable population. Now, on the other side, for the Sims defenders, they were like, but he built this hospital and he took care of these enslaved women at his own cost. And I'm like, clearly you don't understand slavery. Leasing of slaves was really popular. Frederick Douglass talks about being leased in his autobiography. Harriet Tubman was leased at the age of 6 years old, right? Until she was in her 20s. Leasing was as popular as people lease cars now. And so Sims doesn't take care of them because he's some, benevolent slave owner. He assumes a financial cost because he leased them. And he told the owners, I will do my best to try to repair these women, and I'll do so with the understanding that I'm paying for food, the medical care, those kinds of things. This was a 19th century business transaction that took place quite often. So during this time, Sims, remember those two pewter spoons? Sims was able to get a jeweler to create the Sims speculum. In fact, to this day, it's still called the Sims speculum. There is a movement afoot to get the name changed, but most folk today are familiar with this speculum. This is an earlier, earlier form of the speculum, but the duckbill speculum that doctors use for pap smears, right? Cervical examinations. This is where it comes from. He literally designs this on the bodies of these enslaved women. And the experimentation took place for almost 5 years, from 1844 to 1849. He also creates, and I'm going to go back to the speculum in just a minute, but I just want to show you this position. He calls the Sims position. And essentially it's a position for the lithotomy, but he calls it the Sims position. So if there was something that Sims was pretty good at, and I would say pretty exceptional, it's this kind of marketing or branding of himself, right? Naming instruments after himself and surgical positions. So after 4 years, after almost 5 years, Sims claims that he has cured or perfected his silver suture method, right? So instead of the silk suture that had been done before, he uses silver thread, right? To repair obstetrical fistula, does this repair. Now, what's interesting though, in between those 5 years, a couple of things happen. After about 2.5, 3 years, the white community withdraws support of Sims because he keeps failing. And Sims even writes in his autobiography that there were intimations that perhaps he had been experimenting on these enslaved women like guinea pigs. And he just kept failing. He just could not seem to cure these women. And on top of this, he had 2 white male surgical assistants. I know the name of one of them, Nathan Bozeman. They both quit. And so Sims is literally left with a bunch of sick enslaved women, but he has no surgical assistants. He has no nurses. So guess what he does? He trains his enslaved patients to also serve as his nurses. And I often, I say this in jest, but there's some seriousness to it. Sims doesn't get the kind of successful surgical repair until he has a different team of assistants, right? These illiterate enslaved women. And so this is a moment that I like to tell audiences and my students to think about racial cognitive dissonance, right? The thing is, the ideas about women were not as smart as men because the nerve endings in their uteri control their thinking, right? But Black people were even worse. So here you had Black women who were illiterate, and yet he teaches them the very same thing that white men who were literate, right, who had been trained under him, he teaches them the same things. And in fact, he gets it right with their assistance. And so, you might live in a time period where you literally see that the things that are happening in front of you are very different than the belief systems, but there's such a embrace and a kind of marriage to those fictions around sex and gender and race, that even though Sims sees that these women are capable as his assistants, the ways in which he writes is still reflective of the kind of racial the racial etiquette of the South, but also the kind of reigning paradigms around race and science and biology. So, okay, it's 1849, the women are sent back, they're cured. But there's something that goes to that biomedical ethical question. And I had to think as I was looking through the sources, because that's the thing, I didn't find any new sources, I read them differently because I decided to focus on the enslaved women. And I thought, how do I read these sources and get something from people who didn't leave written records? The only written records are by the doctors or the slave owners. And so I looked at the 1850 census about Sims, and I said, okay, everybody wrote that he owned at least 17 slaves. Okay. But what if we start looking at the lives of those he owned? And so I said, okay, out of these 17 people, we'll never know their names. In fact, he only recorded 3 of them, Anarcha, Betsy, Lucy. We don't even know the names of the other women. But out of the 17, how many were male? Because maybe these women were married. 5 of the males were all children, which would lead me to believe that they're probably the children of these enslaved women. So that X's them out as fathers of any of the young people on the census. The other thing I start to look for are ages. Okay, let me look for the ages of the women. Sims says he canvassed the county for a little over half dozen cases. The women who are birthing age they number about 8 or 9. So I said, okay, that's right, because everybody else was either an infant or an elderly person. Then I start to look at the racial designation, because the 1840 census was the first census that listed folk by race. And so all of a sudden, Negroes are now listed in the census as Negroes. Everybody is N, 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 and there's one M for mulatto. And I said, well, who is a mulatto? The youngest person on the plantation, a 2-year-old girl. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, how is a mulatto girl born during an experimental trial where in fact, you're not supposed to have ripping? And so I never know, we'll ever know who the father was. But what I do know is this child's presence was so markedly different in terms of her appearance that everybody else is a Negro and she's the only one listed as a mulatto. And as I start to look at the dates in his autobiography, all of a sudden I see this child is born around the same time the white community withdraws support and his white male surgical assistants leave. So for me, that was the smoking gun. That's the thing that we need to really be concerned about, because as we know, right, white slave-owning men had been having sex with their enslaved women since the 1600s. That's not new. But here's a doctor who was charged to care for these least people and to also make sure that their bodies weren't being harmed, and yet a woman becomes pregnant during this moment. The other thing that was interesting, once the articles were published, all of a sudden, I'm going to hurry up here because I know we need time for Q&A. All of a sudden, though, you start to see that the illustrations don't match the words in the article. And for all of the subsequent articles that ever came out about Sims's work, and there were a number of commemorative articles as well, all of a sudden a nurse is a white woman. The patient is white. And so you're like, wait, what's going on? How is there this erasure of Blackness that happened? And so this is why when I began my research so many years ago, people were looking at me like, I don't think you have enough. Slavery and gynecology? No, no, no. And I'm saying, I'm reading the words, even though the illustrations might not match. The words are saying Negro servitor, negress, right? Slave. And so people tend to pay attention, right, then and now to illustrations. And so what happens in the history of this branch of medicine, all of a sudden, Blackness, slavery, all of that is erased. Unless we think that this is somehow just exceptional to Sims, Nathan Bozeman, one of his surgical assistants, who becomes his, later one of his most vocal critics, does the same thing in a medical journal article. And unless every enslaved person in that area of Alabama looked white, there's no way that all of the enslaved people, right, are white or look, kind of white appearing. And so once again, it shows this kind of framing Blackness as erasure, that Black people don't exist anymore. So that brings us to the current moment, right? What does this historical story have to do with the present moment? Well, the legacy of medical racism is that the stats are unfortunately about the same. There's our article I wrote with a really esteemed historian of science and medicine, Charlotte Fett, that we published in the American Journal of, the Journal of American Public Health. And I remember one of the editors said, wait, are you saying that the stats for Black women's maternal morbidity and mortality rivals that of enslaved women in the 19th century? And we're like, we are saying that. And so we had to prove it. So we came with our historical receipts, right? And so if you look in that article, you'll find the source, right? This is the sad reality that today Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. And so the legacy of Sims for me is not rooted in whether the statue remained or was taken away, but how do we change the material conditions of Black women and Black birthing people who are experiencing this crisis, but also, beyond just changing the material conditions, which is really important, how do we change the ways that people learn about bodies, how medical residents and doctors respond to Black women and Black birthing people as their patients? And so I really want to have us really move Black women from being historical objects so that they can become the subjects that we are supposed to care for and save when it comes to birthing new generations. So thank you, and I welcome your questions and your comments.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper Owens. This was fantastic. We have lots of questions.
Okay.
First, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Kyle Livy. I'm a professor of history here at Ohlone College, and I'm co-director of the Lytton Center for History and the Public Good. And I did go to grad school with Dr. Cooper Owens, and we have lots of stories which we will not answer or talk about in the Q&A. But I'm really excited to ask some of the questions that we've gotten from our students, and I want to do a little shout out to our Umoja students who are in the room. It's good to see everybody, and also really great to see we have some students from some different institutions as well, including San Francisco State. So really glad to welcome them, actually people from all across the country, which is really fantastic to have them here for this talk. My first question, we have a question from a student who wants to know, what triggered you to become a historian, and what advice do you have for students interested in history?
Oh, that's really great. It was probably, and I put this on my personal website. My grandfather, I grew up in both Washington, D.C., but also the Low Country in South Carolina. And so my people are Gullah Geechee people. I don't know if you all have ever heard of them, but G-U-L-L-A-H, Gullah Geechee people, and we're coastal South Carolina. And my grandfather used to tell all of these wonderful stories, but at the heart of it, it was almost always about enslaved people or our ancestors. And he did so in a way that had me really curious about the Black past in particular. And so I didn't know, though, that people could be historians, if that makes sense. I didn't know historians formally, but I do remember in college, I was a broadcast journalism major. I wanted to be Oprah, but I do remember really loving history classes. And so I took some time off and kind of tried to figure things out. And by the time I figured it out, I said, oh, there are actually people who are historians and they make a living this way. And what I've noticed for people who did African-American history in particular, and women's history, there tended to be a kind of political focus. These were people who wanted to help the community in more public facing ways. And so that was really attractive to me. And so that's how I kind of ended up in this place.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it on over to Dr. McCarty.
Great, thank you for sharing that piece of your own personal history with our students. The next question is also somehow slightly connected to the discipline of history, and the question is, I wonder if there's a place in history classes curriculum for this material. It is often relegated inside the gender and women's studies, with the effect of it being studied by only a few students.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a kind of in history we call it a kind of ghettoization of certain topics, fields or subfields. The, I have noticed that when I taught it more broadly framed as, say, the history of American medicine, race and gender, or something like that, race, science, and gender in early American history, there tended to be a much broader focus. Um, but you are right. Often when people hear race or women, they kind of shy away because they think, how is this important to me? And I'm saying the country is experiencing a maternal health crisis with a pretty large segment. I think that's important. If you're interested in saving your fellow citizens' lives or, non-citizens' lives, right? Just human beings. The other thing that I think is important is having institutions where medical humanities is there and present. As a director of a humanities and medicine program, I teach classes that are kind of outside my field. So currently I'm teaching about the history of Western medicine, and that's before the concept of race even existed. But I'm able to have them think broadly about who teaches them about Hippocrates and Galen and Races and all of these folk, because I'm probably the only Black woman, maybe the second Black woman who teaches a class like that in the country. And so it becomes important about who they see teaching it and having this position. But the other class is on the history of American medicine. And I remember some students were like, oh God, why do we have to talk about race all the time? Because I was hired as an expert on race and racism is kind of what I do. But beyond that, when COVID-19 happened and they saw, oh, Dr. Cooper Owens wasn't necessarily trying to beat us over the head about discussions of race, but race and racism became really important to this pandemic. They were like, oh my God, now we get it. And so they were better able to understand a lot of the legislation, the protests, the deaths, the statistic keeping, all of those things that I tried to get them to think about in class became much more relevant as we are all still living through this pandemic.
Excellent. The questions are blowing up, which is awesome. We're keeping track of everything. I'm sort of along the same lines. How could medical programs start integrating this knowledge and awareness of Black women's disadvantages in medical care when it comes to pregnancy within their studies? Do you have recommendations?
Yes, indeed. It's so funny. I have joked now. Kyle and I are Facebook friends, and I do more grand rounds than I even remember. And so medical schools, schools of nursing, schools of public health have kind of always been ahead of the curve, so to speak, in this regard. But they are really interested in changing curriculum, because they recognize some of the textbooks are really old and they have outdated information. Even some of the things that are more well-meaning, like cultural competencies that med students have to take, are oftentimes a kind of litany of stereotypes about different groups of people that need to be, even though they're well-intentioned, they need to be transformed, and they need to be made a bit more accurate. So changing curriculum is really important, and I'm doing a lot of work with doctors, and nurses in that regard, kind of across the nation. So I'm really excited about those collaborations. But I think the other thing is being really honest about the ways that, I'm not even going to call it bias. In this country, we are socialized not to like certain groups, not to trust certain groups. And that's not me just kind of conjecturing. Every statistical study that has come out, whether it's by the government or elite institutions or organizations, show that. And so I often like to pick on UVA, largely because I want to show I'm not being biased. I did my postdoc at UVA after I graduated. And in 2014, a psychiatrist at UVA decided, you know what, I want to do a sample study of medical residents and students here. UVA is one of the most competitive and elite schools to get into, particularly as a medical student. You know, it's up there with Harvard and Yale and University of Chicago, those kind of high-ranking places. So these are not students who are slackers, right? This is the best and the brightest of the nation and around the world who are coming to UVA. So she conducts the study in 2014 and has some really surprising findings when it's published in 2016. Out of almost 300 med students there who were surveyed, most of them believe Black people aged faster, had thicker skin. Black people didn't experience pain. Black women didn't experience pain during childbirth. Black people's blood coagulated more. And I literally say to my students when I talk about that moment, I'm like, let me tell you about a man in 1851 who wrote an article about the peculiar diseases of the Negro named Samuel Cartwright. He also was somebody who invented the spirometer that's still in existence and used today to gauge lung capacity, to assess lung capacity. And literally everything that Samuel Cartwright wrote in 1851 about Black people's difference, this kind of biological difference from white people, even saying that Black people had poor lung capacity because their bodies were weaker than white folk, instead of saying, oh, slaves live in smoky cabins, right, in shacks with no ventilation, right? He literally says, see, Black people and white people are different. How is it that in 1851, this man writes this information? And literally you have 21st century people who are in their post-educational moment in med school, literally spouting the same thing. So lest we think that, oh, this is old. I'm like, no, these are people in the 21st century who are going to take care of you and me, who believe this about Black people and white people. And so that is a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a few different questions about your research process. And so I'm gonna combine a couple together, which what I have here is, did you face any particular challenges in locating primary sources for this research? What was the hardest information for you to find? And any suggestions for other researchers working to uncover hidden histories in the archives?
Ooh, let me start with the last part of that first. Hidden histories in the archives. Read between the lines. I literally wrote a book about illiterate people. Enslaved people didn't leave written records. The poor Irish immigrant women that I write about in the book, many of them were illiterate as well. They didn't leave records. So I literally had to read these records that were really pathological if we think about the presence of these people in the archives, right? It's never like, oh, Biddy was walking her dog down the street and had a great day. It's always like something bad that happened, or this enslaved person got lashed or sold or stole something. So you have to counter the presence of these people as kind of pathological others. So that's number one. Also knowing that you're reading records from folk who own them, or the hierarchy was so imbalanced in terms of who was on top and who was on the bottom, that I tend to read between the lines, which is how I was able to locate and think about this mulatto child very differently by actually paying attention to who the enslaved people were, as opposed to just accounting for them as as a determinant of census wealth. So that's what I would say. Always read between the lines. Always question the archives. Not in kind of antagonistic ways, but a kind of healthy critique of how do people appear in the archives, and what does this say about the moment in time that they're being written into that record. The other questions in terms of what was really hard to find, let me tell you, slave owners took meticulous records, because Black people represented their wealth. So the records are voluminous when it comes to enslaved people. That was pretty easy. It was the Irish immigrant women, and trying to think about them and write about them medically. People were very interested in them as immigrants, as Catholics, as domestic workers, as criminals, as sex workers, as deviants. And so I'm trying to say, wait, but didn't they get sick? Didn't they have medical lives? And that was so frustrating for me, trying to just find how people were writing about these women and their medical experiences. And so that was really, really tough. I don't think in the book I gave them, I didn't give them the kind of balance that they needed, because just the records were really tough. And so that would probably be my own critique, that I could have done more with the Irish immigrant women in the book. I would also probably say, if you're going to do a comparative history, just know it takes a while. It's going to take a long time, because you have to really figure out, like, I'm writing about white men who were elite, enslaved women who were not, and Irish immigrant women who lived in a different region, and who are coming from a different place to the United States. So it was a pretty hard balancing act to try and do that kind of comparative history.
Thank you so much. Lots of really great questions coming in, so we're trying to filter them a little bit. I do want to do another little quick shout out to Ohlone College President, Dr. Eric Bishop, who's in the room. It's good to see you. Good to see everyone here today. So we got a few questions that came through an email about the beginning of the talk, about this idea of the monuments and the sin statue, which is, the whole idea of engaging memorial and monuments is pretty sexy in history right now. It's something I'm very interested in my research too. So I really love this question, which kind of twists it a little bit and changes the perspective a little bit, which is, how do we create memorials or memory for enslaved women?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's a tough question to answer. I think in many ways, this is about memorializing their lives. When we have these kinds of conversations and these talks where, it doesn't diminish anybody else. I'm not diminishing anything about the history of medicine by being more inclusive, and actually talking about the history in a much fuller way, I think, in a more honest way, because doctors wouldn't exist if there weren't patients. Right? You can be sick without a doctor, but in order to be a doctor, you have to have someone who is ill. You have to have a patient. And so I think it's important to think about enslaved women's labor from every vantage point, that they were reproductive laborers, even down to the biological processes of breastfeeding, being pregnant, being able to engage in sexual intercourse. They had to do double the work, because they also had to do domestic duties. They had to go out in the fields. So I think talking about them is wonderful. I think being able to, my book, there are books like Never Caught by Erica Armstrong Dunbar. There's so many of them, but books that center the lives of enslaved women that are successful. I say this not as a kind of, I'm going to use the language of college students. This is not a flex move, trust me, but this is something that for me is really important. When I found out that my book, it's been 3 years and it's pushing very close to selling almost 10,000 copies. In terms of New York Times bestsellers, that's nothing. I probably wouldn't get another contract. But in the academic world, the average academic text sells 300 to 400 copies. That's it. Over a lifespan. Like, that's it. The book exists for 20, 30, 40, however many years, 300 to 400 copies. So for me to have almost 10,000 copies, so like I found out in June, my press was like, what is going on? You sold 1,000 copies in June. And I'm like, what? The wonderful thing about this is, this now tells presses who say, nobody's interested in this. In fact, people are interested in these stories. They are interested in the stories of enslaved women. And I have folk who are buying this in different countries, from medical schools and public health schools and nursing schools and activists and artists. And so this is really wonderful, because it sends a political message to academic presses that these stories matter, that the American public is as interested in these stories as other stories, right? And so it allows space for people who focus on these historical actors to really get their shine and to get their due, and to also put the pieces of a missing puzzle together in terms of American history, that there's more than, and I love her, I'm writing a book on her, but there's more than Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and Phyllis Wheatley, right? We need to honor all of them for the amazing work and lives that they lived under really harsh circumstances.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you. Our next question is, you pointed out that James Marion Sims trains and relies upon enslaved medical assistants and thus discovers how capable they truly are. Yet he continues to write about Blacks as inferior. Do you think that perhaps it wasn't cognitive dissonance, but an attempt to gain an audience for his work?
You know what? No, because he already had an audience for his work. He was a pretty prolific medical writer even before the experimental surgeries on these enslaved women. So I just think, it's almost like people today say things about different groups of folk, and you can literally see, a perfect example. I'm a storyteller, right? I'm a historian, but I'm a storyteller. Perfect example. My husband and I are coming from Omaha. We live about 45 minutes away in Nebraska. And he is pissed that Toni Morrison's personal papers and library is being sold, that her son is selling it kind of to the highest bidder. And so he gets on this rant about Black celebrities and why aren't they doing this and why aren't they doing that, and so on and so forth. And he talks about Tyler Perry and he talks about Oprah and he talks about Magic Johnson. And he's like, this is just sad. Why can't we have our own institutions? I said, okay, and then who are going to be the Black archivists or the Black institutions that actually have the money to be able to preserve her papers? And why is Oprah's work in higher ed, creating a school in South Africa, or for instance, literally keeping Morehouse afloat for so many years? And then Magic Johnson's work with Black community members who suffer from HIV and AIDS, Tyler Perry, who literally changed the landscape of Black film production, whether we think it's good or not, but he is the person who hires not just Black talent in front of the screen, but behind the camera in every way, from accountants to makeup artists to set designers. That never happens in mainstream sets. And so I tell this story to say to him, I was like, you are literally saying something about these folk as philanthropists from your own vantage point. And you're not thinking about the other stuff that they do. So Sims, we tend to see him as a historical boogeyman, right? Sims was this horrible slave owning person. And I think on a personal level, he was careerist and not a nice person. And there were a lot of people who didn't like him, even in the 19th century. That's neither here nor there in terms of the way in which I approached him. Sims was well respected. He was a prolific writer. And Sims was actually pretty pioneering in women's history. Sims is the first person to say, very progressive at the time, I think men might actually be culpable in infertility. It's not just the women's fault. I also think that men might also suffer from infertility and sterility. No other doctor said that. So Sims already had this kind of healthy sense of himself where he didn't need an audience. But as a slave owner, Sims is not going to say all of the beliefs we have about Black people are false because these women helped me. He thinks that by saying, oh, they were courageous Negro servitors, that's enough. Because guess what? The one thing that you can say about a good slave who follows directions is that, oh, they were sensible, or they were courageous, or they were brave, but that doesn't necessarily change the ways in which these folk who are so invested in their own whiteness and supremacy and even white nationalism, it doesn't change the ways in which they see most Black people because of the experiences of just a few who lived inside their orbit. So yeah, Sims's experience with these half dozen enslaved women doesn't change anything about the kind of larger sense of his thinking about Black people and white people. Black people are still inferior, and every Black person around him doesn't possess power, and he sees them as not equal. So that's kind of where it is.
Thank you so much. Okay, so here's a question that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure it will be to you too. What tips would you give a student who's trying to build their historical writing skills?
Oh my gosh, yes, indeed. Kyle has probably heard me bemoan this. I was told in grad school that I did not know how to write. And it crushed me. I didn't write for a year. And so even out of my very close circle of friends, we had a group called the Sister Scholar Group, and I was the last one to write, to get tenure, to get my book published, because I literally believed I couldn't write. And I remember, there were just, it wasn't so much like the comments about the actual writing that I could deal with. If you tell me, oh, this is disorganized, or, this is rambling, or what, I can deal with that. But it was the way in which the message was delivered, like, oh, didn't you go to public school? Oh, aren't you from the South? Oh, you're bright, but maybe you should go to the lab. And UCLA's writing lab was meant for undergrads and not PhD students. So, dealing with all of those dynamics, I was just kind of frozen. My advisor told me something that was really helpful. She was like, look, you're studying to be a historian. We kind of make our bread and butter by writing, and there's various kinds of writing, whether it's a lecture, an article, whatever book, we have to write. And so she said, you need to join a writing group, and then you need to present your work. And so I joined a writing group, and I was petrified, and I presented my work. And the more I did that, it kind of toughened me up to criticism. It also made me really focus on what is their assessment about my writing that I can actually improve upon. And so by the time I graduated UCLA, I had won a dissertation writing prize. And then my first book won a prize. So even to this day, when people say, oh my God, your writing is so good, there's still something inside of me that's like, kind of like, really? What? Okay, thanks, I guess. It's still hard to believe that. So I would say just keep practicing. I practiced writing everything, even my Facebook posts and tweets, I'll go back in and edit because I'm constantly self-editing. It's like riding a bike or rollerblading or something like that. You just have to keep at it.
That's a phenomenal answer. I just want to sort of call attention to something too, which is a lot of folks, and I know we have some future historians in the room, future lawyers, public policy advocates, future nurses. We have an incredible nursing program at Ohlone. All of these are professions where we communicate in writing. And I think so often, especially in terms of race and class, there's this critique that's meant to shut people down. And we have to sort of destabilize that critique. And I love that response, because I know for me, what built my own confidence is working in a writing group too. And that's a really great response. I really wanted to say how much I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're awesome. Okay. Heather, go ahead.
I also truly love that response as well, and I'm a big fan.
You're muted. Sorry, you're muted, Heather.
Thank you. I was saying that I also love that answer, and I'm a huge fan of writing groups. I think sometimes we forget to communicate even to our students that, writing is a learned skill. It is a craft that you only improve at the more you do it. And I think, hearing your, honesty shared journey with that process is really fantastic. So thank you. Thank you for that answer as well. This next question is sort of a broader philosophical discipline question, and it is, what do you think is the role of history in weighing public policy?
Ooh, that's a really good, really good question. History is, I'm gonna, as a historian, I think it's really important to have context for understanding the past and how certain legislation has come to be. But what I realize is, even if one doesn't know the name of the book or the author, right? The fact that the policy analyst or the legislator has read it and collected this data and been able to interpret it in a way that they can say, all right, this works or this won't work. Have we been here before? Is this similar to something that has happened in the past? What kind of blueprint does this historical moment or text or, whatever, what does this provide for us? I think that's where I'm much more interested in, not necessarily the book or the historian who came up with it, but the impact of that work on the ways that policy can really shape our lives. So I think in some ways, history kind of filters down. So most people are going to say, oh, I first learned about this from this article in a newspaper, something like that. But they don't know that the newspaper, like the journalist, has read a history book or talked to a historian to be able to get the context. And so that's where I think we just keep plugging away. So now I can say things like, oh, talented 10th. And you may not know W.E.B. Du Bois, you may not know the name of his book, but there's something about the critique of Black elitism or the politics of respectability that's linked to a kind of talented 10th theory that he came up with. And he was a trained historian. So there are ways that, you know, we tend to think about these things in terms of policy or even cultural representations, and how the politics of respectability are so important for certain communities. And W.E.B. Du Bois's work is central to that. So, you know, I would hope that more historians and legislators could work collaboratively. That just does not seem to happen. I work mainly with activists. Typically, if I work with legislators, it's kind of to do something that's more commemorative, like, hey, let me give you a proclamation for doing X, Y, and Z in the field of history. And that doesn't really change anything. The activists are really the ones who are like, okay, let me read this book. Okay, this is great. Now I have the backstory. So when I'm advocating for this thing, you know, and I'm talking to the public policy folk and I'm talking to the government officials, this is how we can make things change. And in fact, if you're trying to do something regressive, I can say, nope, this happened in 1952. This didn't work then. It's not going to work now for these reasons. And that's where I think the history piece becomes really important. But unfortunately, we tend to be left out of the conversation. So we just have to make sure that our work is tight and influential and goes to a broad audience so that the legislators are at least made aware.
Okay, we've come to the last question.
Okay.
I know. There are many more. We've been trying to pick across the spectrum of some different areas. And so this last question actually was just posed. And the question is, why do you think reproductive healthcare inequities continue to exist for Black women today? And what can we do to change the broken system permanently?
Oh, this is wonderful because it kind of bookends the beginning of the Q&A. I think it persists because people are still unfortunately socialized in anti-Blackness. I literally just I receive hate mail on a semi-regular basis, not on a regular basis. And so my husband and I were kind of laughing earlier before this talk. And I said, oh, now I know where the hate mail came from. I was featured on a local news channel, didn't know about it. And the person kind of said some things that sounded like it came from 1836, but it was just kind of like, you don't want to blame Black people for being basically, you know, fat or having bad diets and being criminals. That's why they're sick. That's why they're dying. I mean, just kind of the kind of stuff that you hear, you know, all the time, that my grandmother heard, my grandfather heard, their parents heard. So it's nothing new. And I'm not personally offended, but I am like, what was it about literally hearing about a Black maternal health crisis where vulnerable women and birthing people are facing death and complications that would make you go there, right? So this is like the permeation of anti-Blackness that's wrapped up in a lot of things, class and, you know, a bunch of stuff. It's the same kind of anti-Blackness that at UVA, you know, these students would never have said, yes, I am anti-Black. Most people outside of, you know, those groups that were kind of protesting at Charlottesville, you know, most folk are not going to describe themselves as such. But when you dig beneath the surface, right, you start to uncover some of these fictions that people hold on to. And so that means that when you have patients who look different, who sound different, who live differently than you, you tend to devalue them and not listen. So a large part of what advocates, activists, and patients have been saying to doctors are listen to us. I mean, literally, that's number one. Listen to what we have to say. If we're telling you that we're experiencing pain, trust that we are not trying to game you for drugs, that we are actually experiencing pain. And I would even go a step further to say, even if someone was a substance abuser, if they're coming in with a medical complaint, whether they are sober or not, if I'm on crack or heroin or whatever, and I burn myself, what does my crack use or my heroin use have to do with that burn Or if I'm pregnant, help me with what I'm talking about at this moment. If I come in and English isn't my first language, then get an interpreter, right? Or try to be compassionate and empathetic to that person, because people come to hospitals because they're fragile and they're vulnerable because they're sick. And so it's not a magic pill. What you do is you treat all patients the same and you listen to them. And I mean, we're at a point now where it's pretty mainstream to know the kind of influence, unfortunately, of racism and classism and sexism and all, transphobia and all of those kinds of things in medicine, just like any other field. So it really now has to be to, I think the institutions to carry on the work of the activists, because the work has already been done. Now they just have to institute it, and also be a little punitive whenever you start to see the same offenders. If I were constantly abusing my students, whether I'm tenured or not, I'm no longer going to have a job because people will get rid of me. There's going to be something punitive that happens. And so I really think when you're dealing with life and death issues, people need to start to suffer the consequences of killing these people. I mean, that's really what it boils down to.
Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of our event, and I just want to say on behalf of the Lytton Center and Ohlone College, a big thank you to everyone who attended today, and an exceptionally large thank you to Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your incredible research with our community and with this larger community that has joined us here today. If you're interested in learning more about the Lytton Center, I have put links for you to our website and of course some social media, because that's how we do things. So please do follow for future events and activities as we continue with remote instruction here at Ohlone College. And I also just want to remind people, in case people forgot, tomorrow's the election. And I think that's where we take our knowledge of past and present and work towards the future. So I encourage folks who are eligible and able to vote. If you're here in California, particularly here in Alameda County, there are drop boxes for your ballots located everywhere. Everything is vote by mail here in California this time around, which is fantastic. So be sure to take advantage of your right to vote. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Cooper Owens, for joining us. This is a thrill to have you here, and we can't wait to have you actually come physically to the campus when we're back. We'll get you a nice place, we'll get you all set up, and we'll love to have you and host you and show you around. And again, thank you so much. We're all done.
Thank you so much to the community. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.